Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Creating a Template webinar. My name is Nick, and I will be doing the presentation with you today. Just like all of our previous webinars, everybody will be on mute. So if you happen to have any questions at any point during the presentation, please feel free to go ahead and type that into the questions area in the GoToMeeting panel. And at the end of the class, I'll go through and answer any questions that may have come up. Also, at the end of the class, I will be sending out an email that will contain a PDF that's going to cover everything that we've talked about today, so that way you have some documentation to refer back to. Should you happen to have any questions while using that PDF, you can contact our support department, and they'll be able to help you out with any questions you may have as well. So again, today's class is on creating a template. I'm just going to go over a quick lesson overview of what we're going to cover today. So by default, every new project that you start is based on a template. A template determines what settings new projects will have, such as the unit of measure, building location settings. You can even include building elements in a template, or a complete set of worksheets with custom title blocks. You can create a template out of any drawing by simply saving it to your templates directory. To use the template in a new drawing, you need to select the template in your startup options. The topics that we're going to be covering today are going to be what settings can be saved in a template, and then we're going to create a custom template. So first, let's talk about creating a template. So unless you have already created the drawing you want to use as a template, you can start a new project by going up to File and selecting New. If you've already started a drawing that you want to use as your template, then you can open that drawing up and continue to work on it. Once you select File New, it's going to bring up this dialog box for you. That's going to show you all the available templates to choose from. And this is where your new template is going to be visible whenever you start a new drawing. The key here is you want to try and select a template, since we've already created some of these, that's going to be closely matching what you need for your building area. Since settings differ from region to region, we have established a default template for a lot of different areas. We do have a full basement option, which is going to be your standard home construction. So this template will have a foundation, a ground floor, and a second floor. We have this in both imperial and metric. We also have a steel framed construction template. So if you're working with steel framing, we have pole barn, light commercial, log home, your slab on grade options, and then we have some estimating options as well as some Australian options for Australian users. And then the last two options you see are just presentation drawing formats in both metric and imperial. So again, depending on the type of template you're looking to create, you can choose one of these existing options and edit it to create your custom template. I'm just going to use the standard home construction, and I'm just going to go up and I'm going to say create. This will start a brand new drawing for me. And right now I would be able to start and go through and start to create my model if I wanted to, but we want to customize this actual drawing to be a new template. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go down into the building locations. So depending on what you're comfortable with, if you're more of a menu user or a button selector, you can go up to your menu option. You can go to settings and you can select building locations. If you like to use the buttons that are right in your face, right on the screen, you can actually just select the building locations button. This will bring up the building locations dialog. And in here, you're able to control a bunch of different settings that are going to be relevant to your area. So again, if you are building something on a site that's going to have a full foundation, a ground floor, and a second floor, then this is the template you're going to want to select. In here, you can adjust your building locations accordingly. So I can adjust my foundation to sit at a level that's going to be relevant to me. I can adjust my ground floor and my second floor accordingly. This is how far off of the terrain your first floor is going to sit. So this 1 foot 5.5 inches, if I select edit on there, is from the top of the terrain to the top of my first floor. So that is that 1 foot 5.5 inches. From there, everything else is going to be based off of the top of floor. So my head height, ceiling height, and wall height is from top of floor, not from terrain. So whenever we see that 8 foot 1 1/8, it's going to be from the top of the floor up to the top of the wall. We can also see that the top of wall from grade is also being displayed, and we can see that value grayed out. We don't want to be able to adjust it, we just want to be able to see it. If I cancel out of there, and then again, that will be true for all of your other locations as well. So you can use that edit option just to get an idea of what that looks like. The head height, ceiling height, and wall height options are also available for you to adjust. I like to point out that this should be the majority of what your head height, ceiling height, and wall heights are going to be in your drawing. I do know that some drawings have head heights that are higher in some areas, ceiling heights that are higher in some areas, and walls that may be higher in some areas. But whatever the majority is, I would make that the value here. In your drawing file, you can select those individual openings, ceilings, and walls, and you can adjust their property so that they sit a bit higher by either elevating them or adjusting the wall heights. So again, whatever the majority is, make that the value here. And again, that will be true for all of your different locations. The last option you're going to see here is framing options. And if you're using Building Essentials or Construction Suite, you will see the framing options. If you're using Personal Architect or Pro Architect, you will not have the framing options, as you will not be able to edit the framing. But for our Building Essentials and Construction Suite users, you can select this option and you will have a different selection for each location, and that is done by design. We want you to be able to specify how you want your headers and framing for each location. So if I select the browse button beside my ground floor, I can define a load-bearing span table for just my ground floor. This load-bearing span table is going to control, and if I double-click on there, it's going to control what size headers I'm going to be using for that particular location. Since my ground floor will potentially be carrying a second floor and a roof, the headers on my ground floor may be larger than the headers on my second floor. So that's why we give you that ability to separate them out. So in this dialog, I can control and select which header configuration that I want. Do I want a 2-ply or a 3-ply span table? If I double click on the 2-ply span table, in here you can see the wall framing span table library. So this is just telling us what spans are available. You can add to this and adjust it accordingly. And then what header configuration are we actually going to use? So here we can see anything up to a 3 foot is going to be using a 2-ply 2x4 header. Anything 3 foot 1 up to 6 foot is going to be using a 2-ply 2x6 header, and so on. If I look at the 3-ply span table and I double click on that, we can see we have a couple of more options, and then we have the headers being used as a 3-ply. And when you select in here, you can see the actual highlight of what it is. I again like to use the right click option and do the rendered outline. I can see things a little bit clearer as to what everything is. But in here, what we're basically saying is, and if I just click that browse button and I bring this up, so right now we're actually inside the head sill configuration. So we're actually defining how we want this opening to be framed out. So again, I'm going to right click, rendered outline, and what we're looking at here, whenever you select an object, it will highlight in that dialog for you so you know what you're editing. So since we are using a larger header here, our defaults are saying we want to have a double jack and a double king stud on both the left and right side. We are also going to double up the sill plates. So we actually have 2 sill plates sitting in here. These are just defaults. You can customize this to match what you would actually use in your practices. You can edit things out of here, add things to it, adjust however you see fit to match your practices. And you can delete these out, copy, or add to create, again, whatever setting you would use. Just some things I want to point out in here. You'll notice that some of these members are showing up as red, and some of them are actually showing their wood texture. and that is because of the settings that we have applied to them. So anything that is showing as a red highlight is going to be using the wall properties. What this entails is whatever wall you add in, be it a 2x4 or a 2x6 wall, it will use that member for that framing option. So if I was drawing with a 2x6 wall in my drawing, it would look at the wall properties and say it is a 2x6 wall. We're going to use a 2x6 member to frame this out. However, when we look at our header, it is showing up as an actual member. And that is because we're using an actual member from the member library. So I don't want this to be using a 2x6 member because I don't want it to be associated to my wall properties. I want to define the actual member that I want for that header. So that's why you have that member library option and the wall properties option. So you can control exactly what member is going to be used or reference the wall properties. I'm just going to click cancel on that and cancel all the way out of here. We also have the same options for your non-load bearing walls. So this will be for any of your interior walls. You can again create a custom span table for your interior walls that are not going to be supporting anything. So you wouldn't want a large header above those. You would just have a default 2x4 or what have you header above that opening itself. The intersection lookup table will actually reference a library that is in the program by default, and it's going to be using a intersection lookup library. And in here we have a couple of options for you, and again, these are just defaults that you can use, and you can add to this again and customize it. But we also have the log wall intersections if you were drawing with a log wall, but by default we have just the turn stud. And there's a couple of different options with the turn stud. We have a 4-stud corner, a 3-stud energy corner, where you would actually pack insulation into the cavity of that corner configuration. So again, there's different configurations for that, and you can add to it. The only way to actually edit that is in the drawing file. So I can't double click on this and edit anything in here. This is just a lookup table. So once it's in the drawing, you can edit that intersection and customize that lookup table to show exactly what you want for your individual intersections. Just going to click cancel on that. And then we also have the infill configuration. And under the infill configuration, this is how your walls are going to be framed out. So right now we're using a 16-inch on center with a double top plate, and we want our walls to be blocked. Well, for this particular design, I don't want all my walls to be blocked. I only want certain walls to be blocked, but the majority of my walls are just going to be a 16-inch on center with a double top plate. So I'm just going to go in and select the 16-inch on center double top plate. I am then going to say, okay, but if I want to take a look at that quickly, I'm just going to double click on it. And again, you're going to see, I like to turn that rendered outline so we can see what we're looking at. And again, we can control how things are going to be framed out. So we have our bottom plate is using whatever the wall properties define. If this was to be a wall that's going to sit on a concrete slab, I would probably want that to be a pressure treated piece of lumber. So I would do something like this one here where it has a different bottom plate, and I can see that it's using a 2x4 or a 2x6 pressure treated bottom plate. And I can define exactly what that is. And then I can select the member library option, and I can go through and say exterior grade lumber, and I just want that to be a 2x6, and it will now apply that 2x6 member to the bottom of that wall. So I can see that member is being used. You would need to know ahead of time what type of walls you're going to be drawing in if you're setting that up in your building location. So if you know you're going to be drawing with a 2x6 wall, then you would want to make sure that you set that up in your building locations to use that 2x6 pressure treated bottom plate. The top plate and the very top plate and your studs are all going to use whatever you have defined as your wall properties again. So you're not going to need to make any adjustments there. I'm just going to click cancel, and I'm going to say okay to make that adjustment. There's also a framing rule, and you can adjust how you want this to be framed. So you can start your framing from the bottom left, bottom right, top left, from the start of the wall or from the end of the wall. Again, this is just a preference that you can use for your particular projects. I'm just going to leave mine as set from bottom left, and I'm just going to say OK. I'm just going to make one other change in here just so that everything is the same. So I'm just going to make sure that that is using the same thing. So we're just using that 16-inch on center double top plate. We're going to say OK. And once you're done with that, you can simply select OK. I do recommend making sure that you're on the ground floor if you're going to be saving this, because typically you would start with your ground floor in most cases. So whenever you open your template, you want that to open on the location you want to start working with. So I'm going to set mine to be ground floor, and wherever that green check mark is, that is the current location. I'm just going to say OK, and that saves my building location adjustments. Next, we're going to go up and we're going to select settings, and we're going to go up to program settings. So we're going to select settings, program settings. And under the program settings, we have a couple of different options for you in here. I'm just going to go down to the drawing aids tab, and in here you can set up your preferred program settings. So when saved in a template, they will activate with each new drawing, so you don't have to redo this every single time you start a drawing. Some of the values in here that I like to adjust are going to be the nudge distance. So typically I have mine set to 1 inch and 1 foot. A nudge distance, if you're not familiar with it, is the ability to have an object that is selected, and then by simply using the arrow keys on your keyboard, you can move that selected object whatever the distance is that is in here. So if I have this set to 1 inch as an example, so I'll just make that 1 inch, and I have a toilet as an example selected in my drawing. If I press the arrow keys left, right, up, or down, it will move that toilet 1 inch left, right, up, or down in my drawing area. If I hold the control key down and press those same arrow keys left, right, up, or down, it will move that selected toilet 1 foot. So these are values that I use, or this is a command that I use quite regularly. So I like to make sure that it's set up, and I set it up in my template so that I don't have to do this every single time. Some other options in here that you may want to take a look at are how things are inserted. By default, we do pick points and we do repeat insertion. If you want to change that up, you can have this set to be pick and drag or single insertion only. Again, that is a preference that you can have and saved into your template. Another option in here is the building aids. And under the building aids, this is how things are going to be displayed. So whenever I want to select an object like a wall or a door or a window, I'm going to get things called dynamic dimensions. And they'll show up and I'll see the dimensions from that opening to a wall. Now, where is that dynamic dimension going to be displayed to? So here we can see that we have it set to the edge, or you can dimension it to the center of the opening. Again, this is a preference that you would set up in your template, so it's always there every time you start a new drawing. We also have the dynamic dimensions for the overall of your wall. So whenever you select a wall, is that going to the outer surface or to the edge of the core? And again, you can control how you want that to be displayed. We also have the ability to show how the window opening symbols are going to be displayed. Since we ship the program worldwide, there are different options or visualizations for different areas. So if you're in a region where the point is on the hinge side, then you would want to make sure you have that set up so that the point is at the hinge side. If you have the option where you want the open end on the hinge side, then you would make that adjustment. Same with the door swing direction. So in some areas, it is determined by the hinge side is right-hand side, or where the handle is the right-hand side. So again, depending on how you want that to be displayed, you can adjust that accordingly. I'm just going to click apply on that, and then I'm going to go up to, apply and then OK, and I'm going to go up to settings, and I'm going to select document settings. Now, under the document settings, this is where you can control things that are going to be related to the document itself. And in here is where we want to adjust certain things like our drawing aids, where I can have certain things enabled by default automatically. So here we can see I have a grid, which we can see in the background is enabled with the color that the lines are. We have our spacing for our grid and the size of our actual drawing area, which is 160 feet by 160 feet. This also corresponds to the size of our terrain. So if you are adjusting this, you may want to make sure that you adjust the size of the terrain accordingly if that matters to you. We also have, and I always recommend having Object Snap and Ortho turned on by default, and I always have Snap Tracking turned on. These are just features that I find handy while I'm working, so I like to have them on by default. We also have the Building Aids tab, and in here you can again control how you want things to be displayed. So right now we have the collision control enabled. Again, that is another setting that I have enabled by default. That is because whenever I am drawing and I want to place something in like cabinetry or furniture, collision will prevent me from inserting that inside of another object. So I like to have that turned on by default. We also have an option called automatic elements, and in here we have an automatically insert floors option. And this is great for people that are just quickly mocking up rooms and they're not really worried about the structure underneath the floor. They just want to show a material for the floor. So here you can have automatically insert floors turned on. And anytime you close a room in, a floor will automatically be added in. For those of you that want more control and you want to show the floor yourself, you would probably want to turn this off. Automatic floors, while great being added in as a automatic element, don't have a lot of information applied to them, so I can't really cut an opening out of them. I don't have a lot of editing capabilities with an automatic floor. So if you are looking to edit the floor quite a bit, I would recommend having this turned off, and then you'd be able to add in your structural floor and then your floor surface above that. And then we also have the insertion by room option. So how do you want things to be inserted? If you're inserting a ceiling or a floor, when we say insert by room, is that going to the core or to the surface? So how do you want that to be added in? Again, another preference for you. We also have the units of measure. So what units are you working in? What's the precision that you want to be working with? Set this all up in your template. So again, it's there for you by default. I'm just going to scroll down to our dimension auto exterior option in here. And this is another big one that I like to point out because it controls how your dimensions are going to be displayed. So here you can set the dimensions to suit your office standards. Once in the template, you don't have to upload them again every single time you start a new drawing. So in here we can control what is going to be included for that dimension string. Your overall, your projections, and your openings is what is there by default. If you like to show your interior walls on your exterior dimension strings, then you can have that turned on. Once you enable that, then the interior walls option will be displayed, and you can select how you want that interior wall line to be displayed on that exterior string of dimensions. So you can have that set to the surface, to the core, or to the center. I'm going to uncheck that because I don't like to show my interior walls on my exterior string, so I don't want to show that. If you know your drawing is going to have angled walls, or if you work with angled walls quite a bit, then you may want to make sure that angled walls is enabled. This will just take into consideration that when you do an automatic dimension, any angled wall will also be dimensioned on that angle instead of just being a linear dimension. We have a dimension line distances. So this is going to determine how far that dimension line is set from the model itself. So the initial offset is going to be 4 feet, and then any subsequent dimension after that is going to be 2 feet. Again, that's just a default that we use. You can customize that. Extension lines. Do you want your dimension lines to go to the corners, or do you want them to terminate in a straight line? Openings. Do you want that to be to the center of the opening, or to the opening edges themselves. If you are going to be dimensioning to the opening edges themselves, you can also add in the opening heights after the width. So if you have a 3-foot window that is 4 feet high, you would see the 3-foot dimension, and then you would have the 4-foot option also being displayed. How it is displayed is determined by the separation. Do you want it to be 3 foot / 4 foot? Do you want it to be 3 foot - 4 foot? 3 foot by 4 foot, or do you want it 3 foot over 4 foot? So depending on how you want that to be displayed, you have that option there to adjust it. The next option is the end condition. So whenever you add in your auto dimensions, do you want that to be to the surface, to the core, the core exterior, the core center, core interior, or the surface interior? So again, you can control how that dimension is going to be displayed and what it's actually dimensioning to. The last option in this list is our Dimension Auto Interior. So if you are using this tool, this is going to allow you to dimension through your model, and it's going to include the dimensions from leading edge to trailing edge of your surface, or from the leading edge or the trailing edge of your core, or to the center of the wall itself. Another option in here is the ignore wall dimensions. So if you're dragging this through, let's say 5 or 6 walls in your design, you're going to see the dimension from one wall to the next, from one wall surface to the next wall surface. And then this dimension from right here that dimensions the thickness of the wall, it will also be included. So you would see that dimension 6 times through your design. If you don't want to see that, you're going to call it out once with a leader line or with a dimension, you can simply select this ignore wall dimensions option. And what that will do is it will dimension from surface to surface, it will cut through the wall, but it will ignore that dimension, and then it will continue on, and it will show all the room dimensions excluding the wall thickness dimensions. I personally like to have that checked, because I don't want to see that dimension every single time. It looks cluttered and I don't need to see it repeated all the way through. Once you have that set up and you're happy with how everything is set up, you can simply select apply and OK. And we've now gone through and adjusted our settings. Next, we can go through our working drawing sheets. And as you can see at the bottom, we have our model view, and then we have our 4 working drawing sheet environments set up for us. In a previous class, we went through how to create title blocks, and this is where you would do this work now. So you would open up your template, you would adjust the title blocks to show your company information in here, how you want those title blocks to be displayed, and you would then save your template as your company name to reflect all those changes that you've adjusted. So again, in here is where you're going to be adjusting those title blocks to show your company information. You can also add multiple sheets in here. So if you know, for example, that you're going to have at least 8 sheets of paper in here, then I would go through and I would recommend adding in the other 4 sheets, so that way whenever you start a new drawing, it's done and you can simply just start working. And if you need to add more or remove them, then you can do that from within that drawing file. But again, by default, we just ship it with the 4 simple ones to get you a starting off point. Once you have set up anything in here that you want to use, we can then go through and start to save our work. Now, before we do that, I just want to add in a quick note. Any elements in a drawing will be saved as well. So unless you want these elements to appear in all your new projects, you should delete the elements from your drawing. So if you, let's say, started a drawing last week, last month, last year, and you want to use that as a template because you've already done some work in it and you've edited things the way that you want, I would make sure that if you don't want the actual design to be a part of the template, delete it out. So in your model view, get rid of everything that you don't want to be a part of that template, select it, and then delete it out. Then in your working drawing sheets, if you've added in information in those working drawing sheets, delete anything out that you don't want to be a part of your template. Once you've done all of that in your working drawing sheets, I highly recommend going up to the insert. I like to use the buttons. If you like to use the menu, you can select insert, and then under smart views, there is a delete unreferenced smart views. So anytime you insert a smart view into a drawing file, it keeps a reference of it for future use. So even if you delete it out, it will still be a part of that drawing file. This can bloat the size of files. So I recommend doing this not only for a template, but for the finishing touches on a drawing that I'm about to finish. I would go through and delete out anything that is unreferenced. It will reduce the file size for you and keep it smaller. So anything that would show up in here would be a block or a smart view that was inserted and deleted out. If you've inserted something and you go in here, it's not going to show up. So if it's inserted somewhere and it's still a part of the file, it will not show up in this list. This is only for unreferenced smart views. Again, once you're in here, you can select everything and hit delete. Same can be done for the blocks. You can select the delete unreferenced blocks. Now, by default, we ship this out with all these other title blocks attached to it. So if you've edited all of these in your template as well, then you want to make sure that you leave these in here. Same with data marker. I would not remove the data marker. That is that little circle with an X through it that you would use for your elevation views. That's what the data marker is, so we keep that in there. So these are these are blocks that are unreferenced, but I would not remove these ones. But anything else I would get rid of to again help reduce the size of the file. I'm just going to click cancel on that. Once I'm happy with everything, I typically go through and I do some final touches on how I want this to look. So the first thing that I do is I make sure that each sheet is blown up so that it's zoomed to fit. So I always make sure I select the zoom to fit option. So I make sure I go through each sheet and I do the zoom to fit. So that way when I start to work on this drawing and I go to that page, everything is ready for me. I don't need to try and find my title block. Everything is right there in my face. I didn't move anything, so these should all be centered and zoomed to fit the screen for me anyways, but we're just going to go through just to double check. And then I do the same thing in my model view. So in my model view, this is another preference. Some people don't like to see the terrain at all. Some people like to see the terrain so they know exactly where the middle is and they know they're drawing right in the middle of their design. So right now, all we're seeing is the grid lines. So if I select zoom to fit, I can now see the green square of where the edge of that terrain is. So if this is how I want my drawing to be open when I first started, then I would select zoom to fit and I would save it this way. Again, typically I save all of my templates in the 2D plan view because when I start drawing, that's the view I want to be in. If you like to see the 3D view when you first start a template, then by all means go ahead and save it in a 3D view. Once you're happy with all of your settings, we're now just going to go up to File, and we're going to select Save As. In the Save As dialog box, we're going to navigate to the Templates folder. So that way it's always going to show up in the Templates folders. When I start a new drawing, it will be in that Templates window that we looked at earlier. So to do that, I'm going to go up and I'm going to select underneath my C drive, I'm going to go to Program Data. If you do not see Program Data, you will need to open up Windows Explorer. And under Windows Explorer, you're going to need to go to View, Options, View, and then you're going to need to make sure you have Show Hidden Files, Folders, and Drives enabled. So again, underneath Windows Explorer, go to View, Options, View tab, Show Hidden Files, Folders, and Drives. That way you'll see the Program Data folder. Under Program Data, you're going to see the CADSoft folder. Under the CADSoft folder, you're going to see whatever version of Envisioneer that you're using. I'm going to double click on the version 16. And under version 16, we're going to see Templates. In here, I'm going to give this template a name. And for me, I'm just going to call this template webinar, like so. Once I have the name defined, I have the location as to where I want to save it, I'm going to click on the Options button. Under the Options button, I can do a couple of different things in here. I can select the thumbnail preview. So do I want that to be the last open view, or do I want to attach an image file to it? I've actually saved an image file that I want to use. So I'm going to say Attach Image File. I'm going to use the Browse button. So this could be your company logo. This could be anything that you want it to be. I'm going to go into Envisioneer 16, and I'm going to go to Images, and I'm just going to select this stock image, and I'm going to say Open. So now it's going to use that image as my template image. So whenever I see it in that templates folder, I'm going to very easily recognize that as, oh, that's the template I want to use. Under the Notes section, you can define a note. So as an example, this is a template specified in feet and inches. It is the default scale of 1/4 inch is equal to a foot. It is wood frame construction. I'm going to press Control Enter, and I'm going to say this is our template webinar. Something for me to see, just a note for me that I'm going to add in there. And I'm going to say OK. Once I'm happy with all of that, all I have to do now is go in and select Save. It's now saved as template webinar. It's saved to the templates folder. I can go File, Close. Now when I go File, New, I'm going to see that new template webinar. So it's got my new image assigned to it. I can see it in my templates list. I can select it and say Create. And you can see the notes here. This is a template specified in feet and inches. It shows me the scale, wood frame construction. And then it has that note that I put in there of template webinar. When I say Create, it's going to bring up that template with all of the settings that I defined. And if we take a look at our building locations, we'll see the changes that I made to those building locations. And we'll also see that it's saved, showing me the full terrain. So I'm seeing everything. And in my building locations, we can see that it is using the 16 inches on center with a double top plate, no longer using the blocked option. So that goes through everything that I wanted to talk about today in regards to creating a template and saving it for your drawing files. So I'm going to go through and see if there's any questions. I do see that there are some questions. So I'm just going to open up the questions section here. So the first question is, dimension line spacing is 2 feet in our settings. Is this depending on scale of drawing? No, this would be actually 2 feet. So even if it was 1/4 inch or whatever scale you're working in, it's always going to be that 2 feet from that point. So you would want to make sure that you're adjusting that as you need to. So if you wanted that to be a little bit further, a little bit less, then you would adjust that value. But that's not a scaled option. That's the actual distance that it would be. The next question is, how do you add extra drawing sheets? So the add extra drawing sheets, yep, that's not a problem. What we would do there is, I'm going to go back up, I'm going to say File, I'm just going to close that down, I'm going to go File, I'm going to open up my template webinar. So if I wanted to add in extra drawing sheets, I would go through, and that's just going to take a second here to load. And you can do this in a couple of different ways. You can use the right-click View Manager option, and in the View Manager, you can add additional drawing sheets or model views. You can also copy a view. So if you wanted to take site plan as an example, we can say Copy View. The advantage of copying the view is it's also going to copy the title block that's in there. So if I say Copy View, it'll create a new for site plan for me, and it will give it a name of copy. So I would go in here and I would say, well, I want to rename that. So I'm going to call this 5, and instead of site plan copy, let's just get rid of all this, and I'm just going to call this electrical. So this is going to be my electrical plan. So once I do that, again, I can set it up to be whatever scale I want, and I can say OK. Now what I would do is I would need to edit my title block. So it copied the title block from site plan. So it's going to have the same information that site plan does. So if I go back into site plan, you're going to see here that it says site plan and it says A4. I'm going to go back to Zoom Extents. I'm going to select electrical plan. I'm going to select the title block and I'm going to say edit attributes. And instead of being A4, I'm going to say A5 and I'm going to say electrical plan. So turn on cap locks and we're just going to go in and call this electrical plan and we'll say OK. So now it's created a new one. You can also add a brand new worksheet. So I can say add worksheet. This will add in a blank worksheet. So it does not have a title block assigned to it. It's going to be completely blank. And I would need to go in and add in my title block. So I'd go up to blocks, insert block. Since I have those blocks already in the drawing file, I would just select my 24 by 36 inch, say OK, and I would say this needs to be A6, and this is going to be, I'm just going to call this one plumbing plan, and we'll say OK. So now it's going to have a new title block. I can drop that in wherever I want, Zoom Extents, and I'll see that title block. I'm just going to move it so that it sits in the middle of that area, like so, and then Zoom Extents. And then what I would do there is I can select the new view. I would go back in the View Manager. And under View Manager, I would change the name and I would say 6, and I would say turn off cap locks, and we'll just say plumbing plan. And then I can say OK. So now I'll see 6 plumbing plan. Everything is to the Zoom Extend so it fits in. Go back to model. Again, I like to save my templates in the model view, in the 2D plan. File, save, file, close. So even though you've started a template and maybe down the road you want to add some extra things to it, you can always open the template that you've edited and make your adjustments to it and save it again, and it will repopulate in that templates folder. So now when we go File, New, I can select the template webinar, say Create, and now it'll show me all the new sheets that I've created in that file. So your template files can be continually ongoing works in progress. You can add to them, edit them however you see fit, just by simply opening up the template file under the File Open option to do that adjustments. And the other question that I'm seeing in here is, what is Pac Resources function? So the Pac Resources is an option that is available to you if you are sending this file to someone that is also using Envisioneer. So what that does is, let's say you've added in certain elements or certain textures that are only a part of your template or only a part of your file or your catalog. So what will happen is, if they open the file without using the Pac Resources, they may open the file and see a wall where you've applied a custom siding option, so a custom siding material. When they open it, it will be white. They don't have that texture. They don't have that image file to see what you've added in. So what you can do is to get around that. When you save a project, you can go File, Save As, and you can say Pac Resources. This will increase the size of the file because we are now also including any textures or anything that you've added in that is now a part of that drawing file. It saves it all and creates it as one resource file itself. So now when that person opens it up on their computer, they'll be able to see the texture that is only on your system. And if they wanted to, they could use the file catalog save element to catalog, and they'd be able to save that to the catalog themselves and use it in the future. So it is a great tool. It does increase the size of the file, again, depending on how many materials you have extra or how much you've added to that particular file, but it will increase the size of the file. So I do want to warn you that it does increase the size of the file itself, but it does include everything so that everything is going to be visible. So that appears to be all the questions up to this point. So I'm just going to pause here for just a second to see if there's any other questions that someone is looking to finish. While I'm waiting to see if there's any other questions, I'm just going to go over and just to remind you that I will be sending out an email at the end of the class. So in that email, you're going to see a document file that covers everything that we've talked about today. If you happen to have any questions while using that file, please don't hesitate. Give us a call, send us an email. We'll be happy to help you out with any questions you have about creating a template. Perfect. Well, there doesn't appear to be any other questions. So I do want to thank everybody for attending today. I do look forward to speaking with you all again very soon. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.